we have here Phil Rappoport, and we have Alfonso Villaseñor. Phil Rappoport is the principal CEO of Burly Bird, the meeting planner support agency, which staffing and technical solutions for digital, hybrid, and in-person meetings. Planners call on Phil and his team when they need help to achieve a better meeting for their participants. The name Burly Bird is adapted from Whirly Bird with a W. Whirly Bird has two meanings. One, it's a slang word for helicopter. Two, a whirly bird is a nickname for a fan that is situated on your roof to pull the hot air from your home. Phil does not have hot air inside him, okay? That's not there. The verb is in Burly Bird is for virtual, as so much of our world has turned to virtual. So he created the name Burly Bird. For 7 years prior to Burly Bird, Phil ran a mobile event application business that catered to the meetings and events industry. The application was used and is still used all over the world to help attendees get the most out of their meetings. Much earlier in his career, he was part of the team at AOL that brought the world online, well before Google and Facebook were household words. Previous to his internet experience, he served in management capacities for the Sony Corporation, several television and radio stations in the US, and from New York, produced a national television program featuring the top artists in rock and roll. How about that? As an active volunteer leader, Phil is the president of the Meeting Professionals International, MPI, Potomac chapter in the greater Washington, D.C., Baltimore region, the largest MPI chapter in the world. He is a longtime member of other national associations, and he leads Flex, a group of meeting professionals in Northern Virginia in the Washington, D.C. suburban area. So please, let's welcome Phil.
Thank you.
And with us also today, we have Alfonso Villaseñor. Alfonso is a professional conference interpreter with more than 31 years of experience providing interpretation and technical support solutions for conference events all over the United States and abroad. His clientele includes NGOs, corporations, government agencies, academic institutions, and international organizations. He is a member of AIIC and TALS. Let's welcome Alfonso, please. Okay, so thank you very much for everybody's presence here. And now we're going to start. And the way that this is going to work today is that we're going to ask questions to Phil and to Alfonso. And then after one answers the question, if the other one has anything to add, he will happily do it. And then if the audience has any questions, we'll entertain the questions from the audience too. I'm going to ask Cyril to let me know whenever there are comments or questions from the online audience. And here we're going to have Veronica Barcelero, who graciously is going to help us with the microphone for the questions here from the floor. So the first question that I have is going to be to Phil, and that's a question that some of you might know, but I would like everybody to clearly know what is Meeting Professionals International. What is MPI?
So MPI stands for Meeting Professionals International, which is an organization of folks in the meetings, events, and hospitality industries all over the world. We have between, I think, 11 and 12,000 members in more than 70 countries. So it's heavily populated here in North America, but we have a very strong contingent of members in Europe, Latin America, some parts of Asia, and beyond. So I as Tony said, I'm the president of the Washington, D.C. chapter, which is the largest in the network.
Thank you. And so you guys know, Phil is a very good friend of AIIC, and we met him about, about a year and a half ago in one of the AIIC conferences in Lecce, Italy, and he graciously accepted the invitation and joined the PRIMS group in Italy, and that was the first contact we had with him, and ever since, he's been the best friend that you can imagine. He's had a great working relationship with Larry Carbodell, who, as you know, is a representative for PRIMS, and before me, David Violet, had a very high opinion of him, and so do I, because he is always willing to help us and to support us, and that's why he's here generously giving us his time. So I really appreciate that. Now I'm going to have a question for Alfonso. I'm not going to ask him what AIIC is because he already knows, and you know too. But what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you, Alfonso, what services do you offer to those who hire your services for an event? Because there's people here that might not know that.
Good question. I'm a freelance conference interpreter, so interpretation is one of the services that I offer. When other languages are required, I also use my networking contacts to provide interpretation services in other language. Additionally, I also offer the tech support and equipment solution for events. I started doing that about 25 years ago because I saw a need at that time, given that when I started working as an interpreter, I would have to work with other people's equipment, and it became a very frustrating experience over time. And I decided to get some of my own equipment to be able to avoid those pitfalls. And now I offer audio equipment services, interpretation equipment services, booths. With the advent of virtual meetings, I now offer the hybrid solution. So I offer a vast array of different services depending on the needs of the event.
And you're based in Washington, D.C., but you do this all over the country, right?
I do this all over the country and sometimes abroad, yes.
Okay. We're going to be here playing a ping pong for a while. I have a question for Phil. Phil, could you tell us how many events do you organize here in the DC metro area in average every year?
So I'll answer that question with regards to MPI Potomac chapter. So we average about 12 to 15 events per year, a combination of educational events for our members and non-members for the greater community and social events. And Verly Bird, my company, we support meeting planners and their organizations. And that runs to, roughly also 12 to 15 events per year.
Would you say that things are going back to the levels they had before COVID, or we're not back yet, or how is that?
I would say the pendulum has swung back pretty forcefully in the past 24 months. There are still virtual meetings. In fact, one of my clients had a 3-day virtual meeting in September for about 1,200 participants. They also do an in-person meeting, but I would say that virtual is still there, and hybrid, which is the combination of in-person and virtual, is also fairly strong. But many members of many associations really want and crave the in-person experience. And so it has come back fairly strongly.
That's pretty good news for all of us, I'm sure. Alfonso, now that we heard what MPI is and what the MICE industry is about, what would you say about how often interpreters here in the United States work directly with MICE industry representatives from what you've seen?
I can only speak to my own personal experience. I can't say that I've worked with event planners very frequently. Primarily, I work through agencies or directly with the end users of the services or the entity that's putting the event together. So my contact with meeting planners of any type outside of the assigned person that handles a particular event that works for the end user company or organization has been very limited. I have not had occasion to work with meeting planners or a freelance professional meeting planner very often. I actually can't even remember an occasion today. So,
and why would you say that's the case?
I think there's been even though the interests of both industries align very well, there hasn't been a bridge that has connected the industries. So people in the interpretation arena tend to be a bit isolated. They don't see, for starters, a lot of colleagues just do their job. They get hired, they go to the booth or they go to a location, interpret, and then they go home. I adopted this other focus that included equipment. And in order to include a technical support solution, I also needed to understand the event itself, the flow. What is the user looking to achieve with their in-person dynamic that they want to put out to their audience? And it was my job to ask the right questions and come up with the solution that best fits their needs. A lot of times clients think they know what they need when it comes to interpretation. Most times they have no idea. It does not work that way. So it's important for me to broach that subject, but the disconnect between the industries has been present for too long. I was just talking to Phil earlier. It's amazing that we don't have MPI and AIIC meetings every quarter or something, because I think our interests are very closely aligned. And it would be a beneficial relationship for both sides.
That's a very important answer. And just going back to the same topic, Phil, how often did you experience MPI representatives come in close contact with interpreters? What you've seen, what you've heard, what you've observed, or your personal experience?
Sure. So I just want to preface my comments that my comments and opinions are my own. I'm not speaking on behalf of MPI on this panel. I just want to make sure people everyone understands that. So the planners that are members of MPI and other industry organizations in our vocation, some do use interpretive services. Kind of to your earlier point, if they have a relationship with an interpreter, that's an easy call or an easy email to make, but oftentimes they'll go to a service that they've heard of. A lot of it's word of mouth, and they'll hire that agency essentially as they would pretty much any other vendor, your audiovisual vendor, your caterer, the other types of the registration provider, et cetera. So anecdotally, yes, I know folks who have hired interpreters, but honestly, it hasn't really been a topic within our industry. And being exposed now to AIIC, as I have been in the past year, my world just opened up. It's really thanks to the folks at AIIC who invited me, and I had never attended any conference where there was foreign language interpretation until last year. I was new to that, even though I'm not new to the industry, but I was new to that experience. And as Tony said, I'm happy to put people in touch and make those kinds of connections happen on maybe a more formal basis. But I can only speak on behalf of me and my role within the local chapter. I hope that answered your question.
Yes. Alfonso, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. To Phil's point, I think a big part of the reason is because folks in his industry just don't think of the service right off the top of their head, because they're looking at catering, they're looking at localization of a particular venue, the logistics surrounding all of the usual services that they provide. They're missing out on an opportunity, because we all know that there are a million international conferences that don't have interpretation, which is counterintuitive. But I see folks in MPI that could actually broach that subject. Oh, are you going to need the service for this? There's an opportunity to add more profit to their bottom line, but more importantly, there's an opportunity to provide a better service for the end user that doesn't maybe think or realize that there's a need for the service.
I'm just going to accentuate that point even more without revealing the organization. I'm involved in helping an international association with their upcoming conference this year, and there will be greater than 25,000 people in attendance, many of whom are speakers from across the globe. I did bring up the subject of foreign language interpretation. The conference is going to be held in English, and so the expectation, unfortunately, but I don't think that's uncommon. So the expectation is that whoever's flying in to speak will speak in English. It's not necessarily good news. I don't be critical of me for delivering that, but I did. But having that exposure of AIIC in particular, led me to ask that question. Hey, are you looking for some international or foreign language interpreters? The initial response was no, thank you.
And that brings me to another point. Part of the PRIMS campaign has been to really raise awareness with the people that organize conferences and the participants and the presenters also, that there's nothing like speaking your own language, because you always sound smarter in your own language when you're addressing a crowd. You sound smarter when you ask the questions in your own language, because then they will understand your question and they will give you the answer that you need and not the answer that the other guy is dividing there. That is what you need. And for that, PRIMS has been doing a campaign with videos. Phil did one of the videos, and we really thank him for that. In fact, his video was the first one that we showed, was the one that we premiered at the big celebration of the 70th anniversary in Brussels, and we thank you for that too. But that's accentuating that point precisely, that people think that because everybody speaks English halfway in the world, that people get the gist of it, and that's good enough. And in reality, if I am flying halfway across the world and spending a lot of money, I want to make my money and my time worth. So I want to be able to ask questions and understand what is going on. So what I would like to ask you, Alfonso, is let's say that we start having these get-togethers quarterly or whatever with them, with the people from MPI. What could you tell them, and what can interpreters tell Phil's counterparts that does, whether as an interpreter, as a consultant interpreter in general, what can we contribute to the planning and the implementation of an event? What's the value added of having us involved?
Well, if the decision has been made to contract the interpreting service, it'd be a good idea to get in a room with the organizers, the meeting planners, to see how the alignment is going to work out and make sure that we're not just doing our own thing in an isolated way. I can't tell you how many times a particular organizer, maybe not a professional meeting planner, but whoever's in charge of coordinating an event, has just given the interpretation maybe a minute, and they're told, well, they need some space for a booth, and they put them over there, wherever they're in, whatever spot they don't believe they're going to be using. And that's a mistake right there because of our needs as interpreters. And so that kind of collaboration can help clarify that. Even something when you get into the details, positioning of the speakers, for example. I did an event in Denver not that long ago, and they put a giant loudspeaker right next to one of the booths. And so, of course, AV guys, because I know AV guys, I've been working with them for almost 30 years, they like things loud. And I'm having to tell them, you need to bring the room volume down because this is a speech event. People are going to be talking. This is not a rock and roll show. It's not a music program. So you need to bring this down to a moderate level that everybody, will allow everybody to actually hear what they're thinking in their head. Plus, it will help the interpretation process because folks in the audience that are listening to the interpreters won't have to jack up their receiver to the maximum volume to try and compensate for this absurd volume in the room. Little details like that need to be ironed out, and it's best to do it with the other party that's putting all of this together. We should be acting as a team, helping each other out. It's not always the most cordial of relationships at first because everybody is stressed out, trying to make their own thing work and what have you, but still it's necessary for there to be a proper coordination that will contribute to a successful venture.
That's a very good point, and thank you for sharing it, Alfonso. And now I would ask you, Phil, and some of the people here know the answer, but when we talk about your industry, is this a monolithic industry nationwide, or is this divided by regions or by states or by metropolitan areas, or how does that work? And number two, depending on that, how can interpreters find your counterparts in the places where they live? Because we have people here from all over the place.
Sure. So, okay. So as I mentioned, we're in more than 70 countries around the world. I lost count of how many chapters there are. They're probably in excess of 70 chapters. And so it's all listed on the mpi.org website, all the chapters and their representatives. You might not find their emails, but you'll be able to identify them and certainly kind of contact them through LinkedIn, or unless the links to their emails are there. So every chapter is represented on the MPI.org website. And you'll be able to find out where the chapters are and who the officers are and the leadership team. So I forgot the first part of that question.
How can interpreters in their own region find the people from your industry?
Sure. I mean, they could contact them. They could find out when the meetings are going to be or the social events. There's usually a nominal fee to attend. It could be at a hotel. It could be at a space like this at an association. They're really it just depends on what type of event they're hosting, and getting to know them. Just going to the first event, introducing yourselves, and finding planners who ask questions, through small talk, et cetera. It kind of leads. And I would encourage people to go more than once. The first time, like, gosh, I met people, but I didn't meet anybody who needs interpreters. Well, it doesn't mean that the next time you won't, or you can ask them, hey, who do you know in your planning profession? Who of your colleagues, that might need some interpretive services. And it just kind of we're all pounding the pavement in some way. Whatever we do for our living, we're all selling ourselves. And so if you're quiet and stay in the corner, you're not going to get anywhere. You got to get out there. You got to put yourself out there, and you've got to do it over and over again. It's not one, it's not twice, not once or twice. It's a few times, several times.
Yeah, I think the whole thing boils down to visibility. What Phil just said is perfect. That for us as an association, we need to have a presence at these events, a continuous presence, because it'll afford us some visibility. At first, people are going to approach our table, and maybe we're not selling a gadget to count the number of people that are walking in and out, or maybe we're not selling an app or whatever, but we are selling a very, very specialized service. And one way to get into contact with these folks, establish relationships. And again, to cultivate a relationship, you need time, frequent contact, visibility. Only then will they then think about that one guy that they met at that table at the last big expo that talked about this particular specialized service. Who better than to reach out to them in case, or rather when the circumstances arise that they're going to need the service. It's about presence of mind and that dialogue and that networking that we need to engage in as professionals in our own sector with the professionals in his industry.
And just the last thing, not that I'm here to boost your confidence or anything like that, or be a motivational coach, but you know what you know, so use it and go for it. In other words, this is what you do for a living. Find, you have solutions. You are the solution. Go forth and meet people who you can connect with ultimately, so that you can deliver the message. That's how I did it. And in my business, it's just, you're putting yourself out there. I've never spent a penny on advertising ever. It's just being out there and letting people know what you do. You never know. Things, a year or two from now, somebody might say, gosh, who did I meet? And what's her name? And I think she's in it. It's like, and you start looking back at your emails or your notes. And you just never know. The call might not come next week, but it might come next year. And the time that you put in, the investment that you put in your time, good goes around. Put yourself out there, maybe volunteer in some of the chapters for MPI and others, and you'll see. You just put yourself out there.
And remember, we all had to start somewhere in our own profession. What did we have to do? We had to get out there. We had to be visible as up and coming interpreters. We had to network with other colleagues who are more seasoned, more experienced, more established. What's the number one principle? Become visible. Be that person. Oh, she's been hanging around these meetings and she's nice. And then she's kind of building this kind of reputation and this and that. They'll remember that. That's what we need to. We already do this within our own profession, but now we need to do it in their space so that they can see us as well.
Speaking along the same lines, and this is for you, sometimes when we are participating in the planning stages of an event, And a lot of times it's not really with true MPI representatives, but everybody and their brother plans conferences. Even the dog sometimes plans the conference because people invite whoever that feels like they can do it because everybody's an expert. But whether they are MPI professionals or not, what can you or us as interpreters tell them, and Phil can convey to his colleagues, that we as AIIC interpreters can bring to the table that others can't? Because one thing that is true, and it's happened to, I think, all of us, is that when you talk to the event organizers, that, oh yeah, but there's these other people that can do the job and they're charging less than half of what you are charging. But you see those people and you don't know who those people are. You never heard of them. You don't see the resume. You don't know where they got them from. Maybe somebody went to, I don't know, Tijuana, had 2 tequilas and learned Spanish just magically. So what do you think that we can do to differentiate that, us from them, telling them that to the people organizing the event?
Something that's always worked for me, because you can't get standoffish with the client, then they'll just stop that conversation right there. But when they say something like, yeah, well, we only have to pay this much for these people and we got them here locally, I don't know who got it. A lot of these events are organized by the one that lost the bet. Okay, we're talking about a highly stressed person who just got this dumped on them. Not all the time, but it happens. I've seen it happen a lot. So you're already dealing with somebody whose nerves are on edge. And so you need to bring in the calm, helpful approach. When I hear something like that, I say, well, how important is your target audience? Because I've had real cases where I have converted customers when they are looking to expand into Latin America. Then I focus on the importance of their project, their expansion. This is a hugely important thing for you. But do you think maybe paying the lowest bidder for this service that is absolutely key to achieve your expansion is going to get you there? Maybe it only costs 50% of what the professional costs, but how much of your message is actually being conveyed in the manner that you want it conveyed? This can resonate very effectively with the client. It's like, how much money did you put into the cocktail party later today? As opposed to how much money you put into this real bridge between you and the target audience that's going to make you even richer. Think about it. Cocktail party, interpretation service. Don't just treat this as an afterthought, because you're losing a lot of money. A lot of people in your target audience are getting, you're losing them because you're just not speaking to them. And more importantly, you're not giving them a voice, because that's the other thing. These people think that all of the service is for the non-English speakers, not realizing that they want to hear from that target audience. And to give them a voice, you have to get the English only speakers on the receiver to listen to the interpreters.
If I may, I'd just like to,
No, please.
I have a suggestion for everyone in the audience here and streaming in or watching the recordings. Wherever you live, whatever city you live in, hopefully there's another couple interpreters who are your friends, professional colleagues / friends. I would contact them, get together, maybe 2 or 3 people, and find a chapter of MPI. If there's not a chapter of MPI, there's also an organization called PCMA. I'm also a member of that. And approach the chapter. Folks, it all starts with education. No one wants to be sold anything, but if you come to them, if you get 2 or 3 friends, you say, let's put together an educational session about interpretation, language interpretation, the magic of that, right? Because it is. And I didn't know that until last year. So I'm a newbie in your world, but it really, as I said earlier, opened my eyes. And I would approach them to say, who's the educational VP or who's the director of education? We know we're not members. We might become members. We're getting to know your organization. We've got an idea for a session. And the germ of the session, the kind of the foundation of the session is how people interact across languages at meetings, whether they're held here in the States or abroad. And I think what the advantage you have in your world is that you've attended so many meetings you might have attended more meetings than the people in the room. They might say, well, we just, we live in X city and this is where we held meetings and we know what we know and we turn right and turn left and we're at the hotel and there's another meeting, right? You've got that global, that worldly experience, not just because you've traveled, but because you speak multiple languages, and you can bring a lot to the audience to help them explain the ins and outs of even attending conferences and hearing different languages and how people interact. So I think that's just the beginning of an idea that I'm offering those who are watching to come to the chapter with an educational idea. You're not selling anything. You're not going to sell your services, but you're going to offer your expertise, and that is invaluable. They can't really buy that, but you can bring it to them, and it might open up, if one person in the audience or two be like, gosh, you know what? We really have a bilingual meeting and we never really address that, or we don't really respect, someone in a whole contingent of people. We really need to do a better job. I mean, you want to get people thinking about that. Sorry to be long-winded, but that's an idea that every single person watching and here today can come together and go to your local chapter and say, I've got an idea if you're interested, and see where it goes. You might be pleasantly surprised.
That's an excellent advice. In fact, and this is something that we had discussed on a previous conversation, and I learned from Phil that we have a huge organization in Chicago, which we do, and we're having the Democratic National Convention next year there. So because of that, we got together a group of 5 interpreters, local interpreters, and we know that it's not just a convention, but it's tons of other events, side events that are going to be in Chicago practically all year next year towards the convention. So we started to work with that, and of course, there's a lot of events where FPI is not involved, because in politics, there's a lot of other stuff going on, and Chicago politics, you can imagine. But that's a very good start, and that's kind of putting into practice what Phil was saying. That was a suggestion that he made a while ago. Yeah. Exactly. And Cyril, do we have a question online?
Yes, let me see if this particular setup is going to work. I hope that the participants online can hear me as well. We have a question on Zoom. Who exactly do we meet at the MPI events? Is it large conference organizers? Is it production companies, big name language service providers? What kind of audience?
Sure. So the question was, who attends the MPI events? What is the makeup, the characteristic of MPI members? So there are 2 camps, basically, two sides of it, and they all work together. There are meeting planners. These are the organizers. Some have, manager titles. Some have vice president titles. And many of those that I meet are very good at what they do. They work for either themselves, if an association or corporation outsources the meeting planning responsibility, but often they have an executive level position at an association and or corporations or nonprofits. So that's the planner side of our business. The other side is what we call suppliers, and suppliers represent products and services that cater to the planners to get the meetings done. It's everything that includes hospitality. So all the hotel sales managers love to come to these meetings. They want to meet planners. Convention and visitors bureaus are very important in our industry because they provide a service to planners, like, tell us when you're coming. They're usually working 4 or 5 years in advance, and they can help the planner connect with hotels and venues and all kinds of things. And then there are other service providers like audiovisual, caterers, photographers, you name it, all kinds of services. Technology is huge. I've been in the mobile app space. So those folks attend this as well. They're all servicing the planners. The planners have an enormous buying power. It's in the billions and billions of dollars of think about it. you know, of all the organizations that have meeting planners, they spend money. So they're very influential. And so that's the answer to the question. That's who's there. You typically would meet planners and suppliers. But even though your ultimate goal is to talk to the planners and meet the planners, your connections and friendships with suppliers could be
Oh, yeah.
extremely valuable, because they'll know, like, oh yeah, I heard this client. So like me, I introduce people all the time. I don't get anything out of it other than the pleasure of connecting to people. And there are a lot of people like that who just want to say, so-and-so, meet so-and-so,
Yeah.
go for it.
That's especially true if, as I'm sure, if these events have AV services providers. A lot of AV companies should be on your Rolodex or your phone, because they are often a really great source of jobs, because they'll be asked to do some kind of a solution for an event. And if they happen to notice that it's going to involve interpreting, they might venture and say, hey, I can also get you the interpreting. You may end up working for the AV provider, vendor, supplier, being as a client of yours, or they might just connect you even better with their client. And so now you're on their client's radar, and you do your job the way you always do it. They're going to be very happy, very impressed, and that leads to more jobs. It's really about relationships and engendering that kind of trust. What we do is really hard. It's very hard to cultivate a good relationship with a client. But once you have that trust, once you have that relationship, it's very hard for them to go elsewhere. Even if you're not the cheapest option, they don't care. They know what they get when they get you. Veronica, you had a comment?
Hi. Can you hear me, sir?
Use this one, Susan.
Now you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have had many careers, and one of the ones I had before I became an interpreter was working for hotels. And as Phil was saying, I think that also going to the supplier, if you go to the director of sales or the banquet director, they could also recommend you, because they have to plan the meeting, and they can say to their client when they come with a meeting, say, oh, by the way, not only can I provide the food and this and that, but if you need interpretation, I know of this group of interpreters that you can call. So that was.
Yeah, and it's also it's a two-way street, because a lot of times it's us that end up referring the equipment and technical and sound guys to the event, because a lot of people just assume that interpreters come with booths and consoles and microphones and headphones and all that, because they don't understand that those are two different services. So many times it goes both ways. If you help the AV company, then they will help us as well, because you're doing business for them, they're doing business for you, and then you're providing the service or solving the need that the MPI is having at that point. And we have another question online.
And before I forget my idea, because of what Tony said, which is very true, they may think that you bring all the equipment, whatever. Well, now that you know me, you do bring all the equipment. So no problem there. All it takes is a phone call or an email, and you are that provider. Just saying.
Excellent. And we have another question online. When is the next MPI meeting?
The question online is, when is the next MPI meeting? So again, I'm DC based. We had an event 2 nights ago. But I would say, they're all online. Everything is on the website. When you go to the international website, you can find the chapter nearest you, pull down and go to the events tab. Every chapter has events year round. And so, if I don't know if the person is DC based, but we actually have one next week, a week from Tuesday, and it's about AV. So I'll get together with Alfonso, and so it's about the ABCs of AV. And we do various topics all the time. We do contracts, we do this or that. This time it's AV, but every chapter has programs.
That's very good to know. And you guys can apply it in the place where you live. That's really important. But I have another question, Phil. Let's say that you already established some kind of relationship with some MPI, with your local chapter, and you've been working with them. But now you have an event, let's say instead of in DC, you have an event now, I don't know, in Massachusetts or in Florida or in Texas. Do you guys talk to each other, one region to another? So I can tell you, hey, Phil, you are in the Washington, DC area, and now we're having this kind of an event. Do you have anybody that you can recommend? Does that happen?
So yes, the answer is we have various means to communicate with our colleagues around the world. We have MPI establishes quarterly virtual meetings and that are open to primarily the senior level chapter leaders, and we kind of go into breakout rooms virtually. The presidents go in one room, the VPs, the directors, et cetera, and you learn and speak with one another. But there are also online forums. It's daily that I get in my email. If you're familiar with online forums, things like that, people have, pose questions. And there's also a very popular Facebook forum for meeting planners that's worldwide. So there are a lot of, and that has nothing to do with MPI, by the way. So there are many ways that planners and meeting professionals communicate and get ideas from one another instantly, daily, and also regionally and cross regions annually. So MPI has an annual conference. Last year was in Mexico. It's usually in the States. This year was in Mexico, and next year I think it's in Louisville, Kentucky. So we kind of move that national conference or international conference around. It's called WEC, World Education Congress, and we get about 2,500 or so attendees. We also have a European conference that is very popular. This year it was in Brighton, England. I think Brighton is the go-to destination for that conference.
I love Brighton.
And then there's also IMEX, and IMEX was 2 weeks ago. That also is a worldwide organization, and I believe I heard somewhere between this was a couple weeks ago, and they had somewhere between 12 and 14,000 attendees from all over the world. So IMEX is kind of it's another organization, but it's more of a trade show educational thing versus a membership organization as MPI is.
Great. When can we find out about the Louisville conference? When it's going to be? Because this year I missed the one in Playa del Carmen. I don't want that happen to me next year.
So WEC is typically held in June. I think it's either in May or June of 2024. It is on the website at mpi.org, or go to mpiweb.org or mpi.org. And there'll be a link to the World Education Congress, WEC. And this next year it's in Louisville. I think upcoming cities include San Antonio and others. So we kind of go from region to region and to attract members, and members will travel.
Alfonso, you were going to add something? Okay, I have a question for you, Alfonso. Is there anything that you could tell Phil now that, as a representative from people that are in the business and from the MPI industry, he needs to know and his colleagues need to know that we need? What is it that we really need to strengthen the relationship that we as interpreters are not getting right now, and that we could, really change the relationship if we were just to get that little thing or big thing, whatever it is?
I think these large MPI gatherings have a lot of vendors and suppliers for a reason. Meeting planners need services, they need equipment, they need all kinds of specialized services. We can be an add-on to that portfolio of services that they'd have access to. The other thing I see here in this relationship potentially is an opportunity for meeting planners to upsell and elevate the level of the actual program, the event, by pointing out that if it involves any kind of an international contingent, the presumption is always most of these folks speak English anyway. And to a large extent, it's correct. Most of these folks that come from Spanish-speaking countries understand English decently well enough to take part in an event, but they still don't have a voice. And if you want to speak to that audience, you need to give them a voice by providing high quality interpretation services, bi-directional, and it can involve many more languages than just Spanish or a single language. You've done a bunch of 8 language events. It all really goes back to reminding them what their mission is and how you can enhance that mission by adding this other specialized service. So I think that's what I would say, that we need to be in bed together, because we have very, very similar paths, and our mission is pretty much the same, really.
Yeah, I would like to add something real quickly. As somebody that works, like you said, events here in the States and also all over Latin America and Spain, a lot of times when you talk to the people in the country, you learn that there's a conference or an event that they would like to attend in the US, but a lot of them get discouraged because they tell me, I don't speak English, so why am I going to go there for? I'm going to go waste my money. So sure, the ones that speak or half speak English will come, but there's a big contingent that just is turned off because of the language barrier. And this is something that you don't know here, because when you see the numbers, these people are not even on the statistics. But the people that are bringing them over from the other country should know that these people should be included, and that would enhance the event.
Yeah, and I'll just add real quickly just with my knowledge of MPI, we have senior leadership in Europe. So it is based in Dallas. The organization is based in Dallas, but we have senior leadership that live outside of the United States and speak other languages as their native and primary language. So I think there is some encouragement. If we do have a few minutes, I want to talk
Sure.
about kind of the world beyond MPI, that, and things that interpreters can do to empower themselves. That, we've spoken a lot about MPI, but there's really more than just MPI that interpreters can do.
That's great. I think there's a question online, right? And I would like to go back to that, but let's see first what the person that is patiently waiting wants to ask.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have a question online, and 3 formats: fully on-site, fully online, and hybrid. Which one of them is eventually going to win?
So the question is, there are 3 formats: in person, virtual only, and hybrid. Which one is going to win? They're all going to win. It really comes down to the organization. I mentioned a few minutes ago that I have a client who has an annual conference, and they're basically North American based, but they do have some foreign members or members from different countries. But they have a very active membership, and their virtual meeting, which was last month, is very popular. And so they realized, we've got something here and we're going to keep doing it. So I don't think it's mutual. I don't think any of that, it's not a zero-sum game with that. They're all going to win. It all comes down to the specific organization, and are they delivering the value of membership to their members? That's what they're asking. That's what they're all asking themselves right now, is how do we cater to our members? What do we need to do? Because maybe 15 or 20% of our members can afford to travel to name a city, but that means 70 to 80% cannot. So how are we serving them? What are we doing? Are we just sending them a magazine every month? Thanks. Or are we doing something online, or different types of educational sessions, or other ways to bring people together?
Alfonso.
Well, I think if COVID taught us something, it was that Zoom opens the planet for everyone. I mean, I have clients that spent a fortune for years and years and years flying people here to the US to do whatever it is that they were doing. This happens, it's a tragedy, the world is shut down, and then somebody says, let's try Zoom. And for a very, very ridiculously low price, I have an account, for example, that allows me to have 500 people on a call. You can pay a little bit more and extend that to 1,000, 2,000. There are organizations that may have an audience that more or less numbers or that has numbers in that realm, but they've never been able to get all of them together in one place because they don't have the budget for it. But with a cheap Zoom call, they can get everybody on board, and they'll want to put good money into a specialized service such as ours, because on Zoom right now, you can talk to them in 13 different languages. And everybody can talk to each other. It's amazing. So I agree with Phil. All three of these formats are going to win. And different organizations are going to use these or a combination of these as they see fit, depending on their needs. But yeah, I mean, if we have colleagues still that haven't really gotten on board with the whole virtual thing, you need to do it if you want to keep working, because that's just a value added proposition that we offer to clients that are looking for that anyway. It's really a no-brainer.
I totally agree. Phil, you were saying that you were going to talk to us a little bit going beyond MPI.
Yeah, so you know, we've spent some minutes talking about organizations like MPI that are with meeting professionals, but you know, and I don't know all the efforts that individual interpreter professionals do, or AIIC. So I'm a little bit you know, ignorant in terms of your current efforts. So forgive me for that. But you know, I would say that in order to grow your business, grow the profession, hopefully there's a phrase in the, there's a long time phrase here in America, you know, preaching to the choir, right? I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but maybe reinforce some key things. One is leverage your clients. Those who are hiring you, maybe they know other organizations that not our competitor, that they're not necessarily competitors, but they talk to each other. I'm so glad you enjoyed my services that I provided you these past 3 days here in fill in the blank city, you know, and do it in person. Like, who else do you know? Are they promoting you on social media? We just had the greatest conference, 2,000 people came. And by the way, here are some photographs of our interpreters in action. You know, instead of relying on yourself to do it, ask them to do it in a nice way to say, hey, I would really appreciate it if when you're promoting it and doing some PR that, you know, take some shots of me in the booth or wherever, a headset, and let people know that you use these services. In other words, turn your clients, turn your partners into evangelists. They have the megaphone. And other associations, other corporations they're all looking at each other. So leverage that. And I have another thought, came to me this morning actually about social media. So if you're already doing it on social media, all power to you. Do you know when you're on Facebook or LinkedIn and you see a post and it says see translation, right? It's now more popular than ever. You know, click here for the translation and you get at least I would get the English translation. Have you thought about audio? Have you thought about creating a link to somewhere where you are providing that translation? Listen to this post in Spanish, in Italian, in French, in Russian, you know, in Portuguese. So think about when you look at social media, and some of you might be more active than others, I get it, but think about how you can make a difference with the skill set that you have. And just say, instead of saying, okay, click here to read the translation. Okay, it's short amount of time. It's okay, there's what it is. And by the way, the translation might not be perfect because you'll know that, right? But why not record that? You know, why not even do a short video? So I won't get into the whether you should be on X, which I think no, but you know, X or Instagram or Threads. Or LinkedIn for sure, but there are ways. So look at it critically and say, how can I make this person's, this person's comment, and how can I bring it to a larger audience?
Alfonso, you have it right there.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yes, you have a question there.
Very good. And we have another question online. The question is, Phil, in your experience, what languages are the most popular, are most in demand in the US market? And in particular, the question was, how about Italian?
I love Italian. The question is, which is the most popular language? I don't know. I don't have the data to speak to that. I think in America, you might think it's Spanish, but for international conferences, it could be anything. And you could have a speaker from a certain country, and that person needs to be heard. And you bring that speaker in. That means you're translating for the English audience for that language. So I don't have the answer, unfortunately, but maybe AIIC does. I don't know.
Well, just based on the statistics, it's overwhelmingly Spanish because of the geography. That's where we are. And then, the Mandarin Chinese is very important also. And there's other languages. Italian is one of my favorite, most beautiful languages, but in this market, it's not that big really in the United States. It's the truth. Okay. Oh, another question online. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. We have another question online, which is, how is artificial intelligence changing the mice industry, or will change, in your opinion?
You want to go first?
I'll let you get it started.
Okay, the question, I knew this would come up, and I'm glad it came up. So the question is about artificial intelligence. So I'll try to be brief and think through this answer concisely the best way I can. So it is here to stay. It is being used, and I should say, there are subsets of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has been around longer than we think, right? When you call the credit card company, you call it something and it sounded like you said such and such, right? That's AI, so that's been around for longer. ChatGPT was introduced a year ago in November. It's very young. Our industry is getting to know it. And when I say our industry, it's primarily, the focus has been on planners to come up with a paragraph or come up with a page that entices everyone to register now for the conference that's in 3 months or 6 months from now, right? Give me that page, give me that paragraph, right? And we know it's not perfect because it's going into a database, and you have to be very good at editing and all that. It's kind of an imperfect thing at this point. I do believe, and this might be a little controversial for this audience, I don't think it's anything new to anyone here listening that AI is your competitor. There are language translators that have been around a long time. I know of some associations that are using the translating services. Why hire a person, right? And that's unfortunate. And I say it's unfortunate because you allowed me into your world last year, and it was a kind of a life-changing experience for me to listen to a human being. It's human interaction. And whether it's online in a Zoom call or whether it's in person, it's all about human interaction. And I will say this, and I've said this in writing, that a live human interpreter, and I'm not telling you anything you don't already know because you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't be watching if you don't believe it, but there's only a human can capture the essence of another human being, the passion in that person's voice, the intelligence, the wisdom, the humor, the nuances. You cannot get that from a device. The device will spit out words, even as good as it will be, and it will be very good. Don't get me wrong. But I'm in your court, but you have a battle now, and that you not only have to sell your services as interpreters, you have to sell your services as a human versus the convenience of something that's on a device that could just give me well, look, it'll be 70 or 80%. It'll be close. no, it's not good enough. And you need to stand up for like, it's not good enough. You're going to miss all of that. And so it's a marketing thing that all of you have to do as a community, not individually. And I'm sure again, it's nothing that you don't know about. So the answer is AI is here. It's going to grow exponentially. We don't even know what we don't know what we don't know at this point about AI. But it's going to be adopted throughout this industry. And I think it is impacting you and your career and those who follow you. And I think, this industry has to come up with strategies to come back to the human portion, the human element of it. And I think that's, you will have some people who agree with you, and that's your base. And then you've got to win over other people.
Call me a fool, but I don't really give AI very much thought, to be honest with you. And I'll tell you why. Because I provide tech support solutions, I realize where it is or what spaces I work in and think about how AI would need to be implemented in those spaces. Then I don't worry about it, because there's the idea. And I agree with Phil. It's a powerful tool. And as Phil stated quite correctly, we've had AI for a long time. It used to be in the form of telephone technology, voice recognition. If the computer heard this sequence of words, it would respond with a pre-recorded catchphrase or what have you. That was AI back then. AI right now is a powerful tool that needs existing information to come up with whatever solutions it does come up with. Human beings like us many times have to resort to our own creativity and imagination to come up with solutions that will convey the messages and the cultural elements that we have to convey to our listening audiences. I don't worry about it too much, because I just don't see it. May be a fact of, I don't know, at some point, maybe sooner than I imagine, but I don't lose a lot of sleep over it. And of course, I'm interested in it. I'm certainly wanting to understand more about it. But for the spaces where I operate in, what's the next step? Don't even go to a party, because you can have your AI avatar go there in your stead, represent you much better than you could ever. I mean, for me, that would be great, not having to embarrass myself in public like I normally do. But I personally, even though I agree with Phil, I don't see AI as a competitor for me right now, or even in the next 10 years. For that reason, the ones you listed. People bring with them emotions, gestures, culture. Language is evolving continuously. AI may catch up, but as soon as it does, it's behind the curve again. Somebody will record some rap song that will turn the language around completely. A bunch of catchphrases will stem from that. And, look at even the corporate world. We've gone from, I don't know what the latest, greatest jargon is these days to get people really riled up and worked up and really excited about something. It changes every other year. AI can only try to catch up to that. It does not have at this point the capability to create on its own. And I don't know enough about the technology to say that it will never will, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, before we take that, I want to add something. I think that I am in between. I hear what Alfonso says, and I agree with a lot of what it says. I hear what Phil says, and I agree with a lot of what he says. I am not freaking out with AI, but yes, I am concerned. And I think as an AIIC, we have to be concerned, because we have to plan, because yes, we're competing with AI. Whether AI is good or not is the perception that we're competing against, because there's always going to be the client that is going to say, why do I need you if I can have this platform where it can interpret, it can even do it with the voice of the speaker, and it's so much cheaper. So yes, it's our competitor, and therefore I am concerned, and we have to plan. And we have to plan for the fact that it's getting better, and every day is going to be better and better. When I was a kid, the video games was that Atari thing that we were playing tennis or whatever it was, and look at what we have now. So technology evolves and AI is evolving. So it is a concern, but at the same thing, we have to plan for that worst scenario. And that worst scenario is that there are certain things that tell us apart from AI. Some of us work in certain environments where, we work with very delicate matters, intellectual property, classified information, etc., that they're not going to give to an AI and be exposed to some kid in a garage in the People's Republic of China hacking that, like they have hacked the Pentagon, for example. So there's certain things there that we have. There's concerns about intellectual property and plagiarism and all that, but we have to plan and we have to be concerned. And in fact, in AIIC, we are so concerned about this that PRIMS, that Phil is familiar with, our next meeting in Bali is going to be all about AI. And one decision that we took that I think is wonderful is that instead of inviting interpreters, translators, linguists, or event organizers that know about AI, we're inviting the technology people, the scientists, the developers. So we're going to be there talking to the main guy from Google that is doing AI, so we can hear really what AI can do, what the projections are to the future, and then we start developing our strategy, because we have to plan for AI to be our competitor. At least I think that's my position, which is kind of in between the two of them. And Cyril, we had a question. I'm sorry.
Yes, Tony, it's more of a comment than a question. But before I do that, I think we're getting a lot of questions from Zoom. We're not getting a lot of questions from the audience. And that's why if anybody would like to ask a question, we can pass the microphone around, the handheld microphone to the audience. But before we do that, Tony, with your permission, I would like to relay the comment that we received on Zoom for Phil. Phil, the request for you, please convey to all your chapters about the work that AIIC is doing and that professional interpreters, the interpreter community is doing in general, because that's very important for the conference industry to know about what we do and how we do it and how we try to promote communication.
Thank you. I will.
Veronica.
If there are any questions, hand the mic over. But first I wanted to not disagree. Hello?
Yeah.
Now? Okay. But first I wanted not to disagree with you, Phil, but I am personally not concerned about AI because of who my clients are, but I do know that AI exists. And what you suggested about interpreters trying to interpret what you get on social media that is in writing, that's already done by AI. What you get, that translation is done by AI, not by an individual that at that moment decided to do it.
Yes.
So that will be done by AI, not by us personally. But anyway, if anyone has a question.
No questions here?
And while we're waiting for there is one actually hilarious comment on Zoom that we have received, and let me read it to you.
Yeah, well, you got to tell us who said it.
AI translation for French speakers, la grosse de tribunal, meaning the copy of a court decision. AI translated, the fat one of the court.
That happens.
Oh, that happens, but I have a comment. I think whoever is not concerned about artificial intelligence in our industry is not really following up, because for me, it's a fact that our profession is going to be affected and it's going to change. So you really need to understand that so that we are in the front of it and not behind it and then trying to catch up.
And
I'd like to respond to that briefly.
repeat it so that the
It's
people
not
hear
that
it.
I'm not interested. I am.
I'm
And
sorry. Yeah, can you repeat who you are? Because people are listening to. Because you said I want to respond, but without the microphone, the people online don't hear you. So repeat. I want to respond.
I want to respond.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It sounded like AI though.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
It sounded like AI.
no, I do understand the power of it, but if what you say is true, there's no way we can respond to this when it finally kicks in. The day it becomes as good as we are, if in fact it ever does, then it's game over. It's the new industrial revolution. And that's fine. But when I think about AI and the power that it has, I see, in settings where the language used primarily is largely formulaic and follows a script to a certain extent, even in the courts. Once you do enough work in the courts, and trust me, I did way too much work in the courts in my time, you get to listen to the same script over and over again, and the only thing that changes are the names, the dates, and maybe the form that the murder weapon took or whatever. Beyond that, it's all more or less the same language. So in a setting like that, I can totally see AI coming in and maybe being used in a courtroom setting. Although with the circumstances in place, whatever's in play there or at risk, I doubt anybody would accept that as a proper conveyance for the service when somebody's life is on the line, if it's a matter between incarceration or not, guilt or innocence. Who's going to take that step? Who's going to say, oh, let's bring in AI to do all these trials in 1 hour and get sentencings and convictions for all of these criminals or whatever. I mean, that's one feasible possibility for a tool that's that powerful. I think also in terms, when I think about AI, I'm not setting it aside as unimportant or something that could never affect my business. I do, but what I think of in terms of what I do as a business, I think about, okay, how do you put AI in a small room where some kitchen staff are getting a training on OSHA standards? How do you put that AI in there? Because it's going to involve something that goes just beyond putting a laptop there. It's going to involve other things. And how much is it going to cost at the retail point of business or at that one point? And maybe it'll be dirt cheap. Maybe, somebody whoever comes up with the perfect AI solution is going to want to be, properly compensated for it. How do we even know that it's going to be even economically feasible to use it in large settings? I don't know. There are too many variables that I really don't have the time or the brain matter to think about. So that's why I don't dismiss it as not consequential. It obviously is having some kind of an impact. I'm just personally not worried about it because I still don't see where, and I may be surprised at some point, but I'm certainly interested in learning about it. I'm not going to not learn about it and try to understand it.
Tonight, everybody's watching 2001 to remember HAL.
Hal, yes, the computer from 2000. Yeah, not to belabor the point, and I don't have to have the last word either, but in 1995, I worked for a company. It was mentioned in Tony's remarks then. We were at the early stages of the internet. This was before Google. This was before Facebook. And I remember people asking me, what are you doing? Like, why do you need a computer to talk to somebody? Instant messaging? Why can't you just call them? Why are you typing your message to somebody across the floor or across the country? Why don't you just pick up the phone and call them? Uh-huh. Okay. So we saw what happened. And the world is changing faster. And bringing it back to the meeting organizers, they're getting younger, folks.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. No, that's so. But my point is that, the people who you might know, they're retiring in the next 5 to 10 years, and they're being replaced by the younger set. And we all have made comments like, gosh, if she would just look up from her phone once in a while, right, and engage with me. That's what's happening demographically. And so they are going to embrace new technologies. They're going to get the kinks out. We're at the precipice. We're at the inflection point. We don't even know where we will be in 10 years.
Yeah, those are the people with the wristwatch because they have an iPhone. Yes, Cyril?
And speaking of the conference organizers, how do we change their mindset? We have a very good question on Zoom. Sometimes interpreters prepare for 2 days for a 1 hour event. Preparation is extremely important for us because the more we know, the better we're prepared, the higher quality of interpretation the client eventually is going to get. Sometimes interpreters are stuck because we cannot get preparation materials from the conference organizers. We cannot get them from an agency, and we are against basically a brick wall. How do we change their minds, and how do we educate conference organizers that we actually need agendas, PowerPoint presentations, preparation materials How do we get that from them? Because sometimes they are either not provided or they give us to us 5 minutes before the event start time.
I guess I'll take that question. Yeah, no, I get the question and I get the frustration. Many conference organizers also as organized as many are, and I've gotten to know some incredible meeting planners and meeting organizers. They're also under the gun where their agenda gets changed by the executive director or the speaker can't make it. And so there's just a lot of moving parts. So I'm not going to necessarily satisfy this person's question. I would just say, keep trying, keep working hard. If you know that you're interpreting for a speaker, that is kind of an ace in the hole, that if you're part of that conversation earlier on, you can say, look, I'm speaking on behalf of Professor so-and-so, and she mentioned that she would really love to have these materials in advance. Is there any way I can help her get prepared? Because the organizer wants their speakers to come in and hit the ground running and do a fantastic job. So I would say one way is to align yourself with those who you are representing and who you're interpreting for, if you can. Other than that, I would just keep trying and try to get in front of the meeting organizers as best you can, knowing that things change even at the last minute.
And maybe explain the same thing to the organizer. The special guest, the keynote speaker wants to really convey the message and wants to know all this, but we have to know it too, because otherwise she's going to convey it in English, but she's not going to convey it in Japanese or in French or in Mandarin. So we can use that tactic too. Just real quickly, one thing that is very important about AI, ChatGPT, we have to be concerned because it's getting better and better and better, and we have to fight that battle. But we have to be very careful because we have to have one voice, because it's not developing at the same pace in all languages. The algorithm in English is way ahead of the algorithms in the other languages. Exactly, because there's more data, but we have to fight this fight together. So we shouldn't say, oh, I'm in the Italian booth, it doesn't matter, because we're going to be there in 2 years where the English booth is already. We have to all, have a common front, because it's getting there. It's just getting faster in one language, but it's going to get there in all the languages. Yeah.
I just interviewed one of the guys that invented ChatGPT. He is concerned because artificial intelligence learns, and it learns faster than we learn.
Yeah.
So the more data and more languages that exists, oh yeah, it will eventually replace us. Me, no. Okay. But other people, yes.
Yeah, well, same here. That's why I don't lose any sleep over it. But again,
I lose hair though.
you don't have hair, but that's okay. No, they're very valid points. Again, I'm not dismissing the tech. It's getting to where it's going to get, but we've been here before. It wasn't that long ago that I was being told that this new platform, Kudo, is going to eliminate interpreters in all in-person settings, and everybody was freaking out about that. They were going to do Wi-Fi and all this stuff, and then the logistics came into play, and a little experiment in a small room somewhere in Europe was perfect, but then trying to do that with 1,000 people in a convention center in Las Vegas did not turn out to be that perfect. Now they're still using that, maybe, I don't know. I didn't lose any sleep over it, and I'm still working. So again, I'm not turning away in total denial of what technology can do. If anything, if I find anything useful for me, I use it. It's great. But at this point, everybody's up in a huff about it, maybe rightfully so. Sorry, not me.
Yeah, but not freaking out. We're not freaking out. Yes, Cyril, another question.
There's a question for Alfonso. Alfonso, what would be the top advice that you would give your younger self 30 years ago?
Oh.
Where were you 30 years ago?
I just say that's a really unfair question.
Especially because I think your son and your wife are watching.
Oh, I don't care about that. They know me pretty well by now. I don't remember what I was 30 years ago. I was in a different place. I was just venturing into this thing called interpreting. And I thought it was amazing at that time, based on what I had been doing previously, which I didn't like anymore. And so when I ventured by accident into interpreting, it just blew my mind. I thought, this is the coolest thing. I'm going to love doing this forever. And I was working in a little Justice of the Peace Court in Tucson, Arizona, thinking that that was awesome. I wanted to do that every day for the rest of my life. And then that got tired and old, and I started looking elsewhere because it wasn't enough. You get to these points that you think about in advance, that you dream about. And once you get there, you realize a number of things. One of them, after a while, it turns into work. The dream and the money that you dream you're going to be making, they do in fact happen. But that little portion about all the work you have to do to earn that money, that kind of gets left out of the dream. I don't regret the path that has brought me here. It was not a planned path. It was more like stumbling, crashing into things, falling back on my butt, and just getting back up again. If I would recommend anything, is don't take it personally. Get right back up when you get your butt kicked and just keep plowing forward. That's the best advice I can give anybody, because this is a tough profession to break into. And if you don't have thick skin, and if you don't want it badly enough because you love it, because you cannot stop doing it, then don't do it at all.
Yeah, but you were always determined and focused, because I can attest to that because I've known you for many, many, many years.
Yeah, but we were drinking when you noticed that about me.
That's probably true. Cyril, do you have anything else there?
Yes, I think I can paraphrase one more question that we got on Zoom. How do we sell the value of interpretation services to client organizers? Because a lot of conferences are happening in English. So how do we persuade conference organizers that adding interpretation to their conference is actually going to bring value?
Who wants to take that?
Well, why don't we start with
Yeah,
Alfonso?
okay.
I think the way that I have broached that subject and been rather successful with it is showing the client how much it's worth it to them to do things professionally, properly, with good professional practices, because the end product is going to be better. They give a voice to the audience that they're trying to communicate with. And it's important that they be able to hear from that audience as well. So there's a value attached to that. But if you can put it in terms that they understand, such as you're going to make more money more successfully doing it this way than not, I think it resonates. It resonates pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, along those lines, I mean, it really comes down to, but we've talked about this earlier today. It's about who is their audience, what are their needs, and turning it around as a question. Do you have folks whose primary language is different than English? Would you like to serve those members? I and my colleagues have a solution for that. And it's just so it takes some digging on the interpreter's part to find out what the makeup is of that audience. If they're 99% English speaking, there's your answer. But if it's a little bit different, if the characteristic of the audience is a little bit different, if there's a speaker that's coming in whose primary language is not English, they're pretty good at English, but they're not great. They're more comfortable speaking. I mean, that, like they're just more comfortable. You were talking about that earlier, Tony. So I think it's a matter of investigation and really kind of knowing who that audience is. You can find that a little bit online. You could find that through social media comments, etc. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's leveraging the relationships you already have. Some of the powers, you already have it. You just have to use it.
And if I could just add to that, when I talk about target audience, I'm also including the English speakers, because this is always something that people believe, or not organizers, but end users, clients, they believe this to be a unidirectional type of mechanism. We have this to offer. We want to do this. We're telling this to you, and we have these people here so you can understand this. That's only half of the equation. To give voice to those people, and when you do give a voice to those people and you do it in a bidirectional way, it's the English speakers that get their mind blown because of the feedback they get, the reactions, the creativity, the expertise that they find in this target audience is amazing to them. They learn how to sell better. They're learning about the culture. They're starting to get who this target audience really is, as opposed to just throwing their usual pitch at them. I sell more. I do better with referrals and everything when I work into English than when I work into Spanish. When I can fold in the bidirectional solution so that meeting planners and their clients can see the value of being able to listen to a person speaking in a language that they don't understand, but they can because they're listening to me, that's when the whole thing changes. That's when they get it. And that's where this proposition that you're going to fill your pockets in a much more efficient, better way by using this mechanism than not.
And opens up other possibilities, like the American side can invite as a keynote speaker the president of a Fortune 500 company from South America or from Africa or from Eastern Europe, because they will be interpreted into English, people that otherwise they couldn't bring because that person doesn't speak English. And that's a value that we have to emphasize. Cyril, you had somebody else?
Yes, one more probably final comment from Zoom. And there were some suggestions in the chat on Zoom that this discussion is geared more towards AIIC members. I would like to dispel that, and I would like to get a confirmation from the members of our panel. Everything that we were talking about today is geared towards all the interpreters, to the professional interpreter community, not necessarily to AIIC members, not necessarily to TAOS members. It is geared to all interpreters, because all interpreters need to work with the conference organizers, need to help them, need to change their mindset, need to make sure that interpretation services in general are more and more professional. So our discussion today is definitely not limited to AIIC members, even though AIIC is setting it up.
You already said it. There's nothing to add to that.
Okay. Because we're going to the
And I would like to ask you, Phil, besides thanking you for being here with us and asking you to stay because we have something else afterwards, and apologizing to the people online because they won't be a part of it. Is there anything that you think that we as interpreters, as conference interpreters, should know about what you as professionals do that would allow us to do our job better in a relationship with you guys? That thing that maybe you guys scratch your head and say, they don't get it because they don't know it. If they just knew this or that, anything that you can think of like that.
I don't know that I would add anything that I've talked about today, other than, this is your mission. What you do is your mission. It's your passion. Those of you who I've met in the past year or so, I'm personally impressed, amazed, find the best word for it. And I think that we've said, really just, don't be afraid to market yourselves as a community, in addition to just yourself as an interpreter. Look at the kind of the bigger picture, band together with some others, go into it as a unit. The only other quick thing I would say is, I mentioned earlier about approaching a chapter with some content, but as the more I thought about it, as Alfonso was talking and Tony was talking, I think, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know about your profession, but something that I realized is that you are phenomenal listeners, and we've lost that art in this. I can speak about being an American, not to get political, but we're not listening to each other. We've lost what the art of listening is all about. We're just talking. We're talking at each other. We're talking beyond each other. And I think something that I think that's elemental in your vocation, your profession, is that in order for you to be a good interpreter, you've got to be the best. You're like musicians at the highest form. And so that's another topic. I'm circling back. That's another topic that you can bring to a meeting organization like MPI that says, we're interpreters. We have a lot of observations about listening. Would you like to hear those? Can we spearhead a panel? Can we, do something like this and talk about listening? Maybe different cultures listen differently. I'm sure they do. So that's my last comment is that I'm really in awe of people in this room and people online of what you do for a profession. Again, it opened my eyes last year. I am definitely an evangelist for you, but I'm only one. You've got to be one too, and you've got to leverage your partners to do that too. So thank you for the opportunity to serve you again and to be with you in the same room.
Thank you so much. Alfonso, you want to say anything to finish?
I can't think of anything, to be honest with you.
Okay,
I think that's all I had.
then all is left for me to say is I really, on behalf of AIIC, I really want to thank you all for attending this very fruitful session. Thank you to all the AIIC members, the TALS members, and all other colleagues that are joining us here in person and also online. And I really especially want to thank Phil Rappoport and Alfonso Villaseñor for this really, really enriching conversation that we had. So thank you so much, and we'll see you sometime soon. Thank you very much. And we can talk without microphones.